everyone, welcome to my channel or welcome back. So my name is Katie if you're new, and I'm going to be doing a little bit of a combined Pan That Palette finale and a Pan Those Palettes intro for next year. We're getting started a little bit early, so I will have my playlist for this last year linked down below and probably up in the cards as well if you're new and you want to catch up. I know it hasn't been that long since I posted my last update, but you guys were pretty clear that you fully supported me winding it down with Emerald Obsessions right here and moving on to some new palettes. And so that is exactly what I'm going to be doing. It's so exciting to be finally filming these because I've had these picked out for quite some time and I've been kind of working on them behind the scenes, but I'm really excited to actually get to start documenting that progress. Not that there's like a ton, but I'm excited to start actually officially documenting it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the finale portion for my Emerald Obsessions, which I just filmed my last update like 2-3 weeks ago, so it hasn't actually been that long, but I just wanted to go through some general stats and numbers and like reflect on it a little bit, and then we'll talk about some of my new palettes and I guess sort of the guiding terms and how I'm approaching things for this year, for this next year, even though it's still 2021, but regardless. So in January I decided that I wanted to start off my first ever Pan That palette with the Huda Beauty Emerald Obsessions, which is a gorgeous little palette. It looks like this if you haven't seen it before. And I have made, honestly, more progress on this than I thought I would, considering it's definitely not the kind of color story that I reach for every single day. And I have noticed, as I covered in depth in my last update for this project, that I've just noticed that the formula is really starting to change, and I just really don't have the energy to try to continue making this one work for me when I have other palettes that still perform just fine. So I am going to be getting rid of this one at some point. This is going to go in my recycling pile of older palettes while I try to sort out how to recycle these here. We did have a Hudson's Bay, but I guess we don't have one anymore. I don't know when that happened, but it did. So I'm trying to like suss out other options. I think TerraCycle will be one. If you're in Canada and you know, let me know, because I do have a couple of old palettes that I've been hanging on to that I would really like to recycle, but it's just been really hard to find like options for that here. So when I first started off with this project, I had 0 pans in this one. You could definitely tell it was used, but I didn't have a ton of like visible progress on it, and it was pretty slow going at first. I was pretty discouraged with my progress, so I kind of dealt with this real panning slump with this project and this palette probably through until like the summer. And then I had a little bit more time to reach for this one, because as much as I have enjoyed this palette, it's not something that I reach for if I'm in a hurry. I find that it does take a little bit more building and a little bit more blending. You get some really stunning looks, but it's not like definitely an everyday kind of effort for me. So I had a little bit more time to play around with this one over the summer, and I really just enjoyed it, got a little bit more creative. And then I think towards the end of summer I started to notice the formula changing, which is why I got, you know, as much progress as I did on this middle shade right here. And I think it is time to say goodbye. So I didn't track usage on this one throughout the entire project. I think I started doing that, I want to say around July. And I think during my last update when I was editing it, I realized that I didn't actually give like total numbers. So I haven't reached for this since the last update. I've just been kind of, which realistically was not actually filmed that long ago, so that's not entirely surprising. So I wanted to go through like total uses since July, and then I'll talk about some of the new palettes that I'm bringing in and how things are going to go for this next year. So this glitter topper was definitely the most used shade. I reached for this 27 times and I did manage to pan. It did take me a very long time. This one is really pretty, but definitely made me work pretty hard for that tiny, tiny little pan. This matte mint shade was also my second most used, and I used this one 17 times. Then I used this mint shade 8 times. I would say this would be one of my most used shades overall, probably my most used shimmer, because I love this color, such an approachable wearable green, and I really wish I'd sort of reached for it more, especially over the last couple months. I had plans to, but then it just never ended up happening. I used this sort of really deep foresty green shade mostly as a liner and lower lash line, and I used this one 7 times total, and by total I mean since July. I used this middle sort of emerald shimmer shade 9 times. I used this matte emerald 12 times. This one also made me work very, very hard for pan. I think this one is a little bit more firmly pressed than some of the other mattes. Then moving on to this bottom row, I used this olive matte 12 times, and I am somewhere near pan. Like there is definitely, I think you can see a little bit of a dip, but I'm not going to try to push through and pan this one just for reasons that you'll see very shortly. I did finally manage to hit pan on this olive shimmer, and it took me 16 uses total since July. And this gold shimmer I used once. I discovered pretty early on that this is not a flattering shade on me. I think really pale colors and like yellow greens are just absolutely awful on my skin tone, so I gave up on that one pretty early. This has been a wild ride. It's definitely been a challenge. It's been a lot of fun. I really have loved a lot of the looks that I've gotten with this one, even if they're not the most wearable. But having said that, I am also really glad that I am getting to move this one along and to be focusing on some other palettes that I might reach for a little bit more often. So I think I've learned my lesson about trying to pan really, really bright palettes, especially as a fairly beginner eyeshadow panner. So I have a couple of different palettes that I'm going to be moving on to for 2022. So I anticipate working on these probably through till the end of 2022, but we are getting a little bit of a head start. So before I get into talking about my new palettes, I just wanted to talk a little bit about sort of why I'm focusing on what I am for this year. So I have decided to focus on mini palettes as much as possible for this year and just see how much progress I can make, as well as clearing out some of my smaller palettes. I figured this might be a slightly more encouraging alternative to what I did to myself this year. For those of you guys who don't know, I'm in my last year of an oceanography undergraduate, and I do definitely want to go on to grad school. There are not a ton of options for oceanography, the same way there are for like biology, marine biology, even like literally any other subject, I think. I know that when I'm considering graduate degrees, most likely I'm going to end up moving somewhere else if I don't decide to stay here and stay in the same lab. So a lot of my best options are like Australia and New Zealand and the UK, which would be a pretty big move for me from Canada. So I'm kind of trying to have a lot of my purchasing decisions guided by the amount of stuff that I would have to transport overseas. So that, and the fact that I would like to have a little bit more of a successful project in terms of like finished eyeshadows and stuff this year, I've decided to focus on a couple of mini palettes. I don't have as many as I used to, but I do have a couple that I thought would be maybe a little bit more usable and a little bit more encouraging to work through, and ones that I enjoy having but I don't like necessarily need to have as much as you need makeup. So I have 3 that I'm going to be working on. So I think the first one to talk about should probably be what I've had picked out as my Pan That palette, but I did decide like way back in March that I wanted to work on my Pat McGrath Mini Sublime. So it looks like this, and this is honestly such a cute little palette. I got this for like half price. It was like 19 bucks, which for anything at Sephora is good, but for Pat McGrath it's especially good. So I really enjoyed this for a while, and I still really do like it, but I think when I bought this I didn't have quite the collection that I do now. And so this had a really nice solid place in my collection and I was reaching for it often. Since then I have purchased a few new palettes, and I do have similar tones in other palettes that I am more inclined to reach for, just because this is more of a companion palette. Obviously it does have one matte with glitter, which is this guy right here, but it's a little bit too dark to act as a transition on me. So I just kind of found myself not reaching for this one as much, which is unfortunate because it's a beautiful palette. I always love the looks that I get with it, and I always think I should reach for it more, and I don't. I do want to work on this one, and I think for the most part I would love to finish a couple of these guys. The only one that I'm definitely not going to put any pressure on myself to do anything with is this like deep brown right here. Just because it's really dark and it's also a matte with glitter. I don't mind formulas like this for mid-tones because you can kind of do them as like an all-over eye look, but this is a little bit too deep for a one and done, at least for my skin tone. So I'm not really going to worry too much about that one, but the rest of them I would like to get a little bit more usage on. So this one right here I do Sinful, I do already have pan on, and then the rest of them have, I would say, a little bit of a dip. Maybe not so much this guy right here, it's a little bit harder pressed, but I do definitely think that I could get a decent amount of use on these. So this is going to be my first new palette for next year / this year. You know what I mean. Second of all, I wanted to work on my Natasha Denona Mini Retro. So this is actually new-ish to me. I did get this at the beginning of the year and I really do enjoy it, and I reach for it whenever I'm in a hurry and want to look like I have it together, but it's not something that I like need in my life, you know? There are some palettes that I would automatically go out and repurchase, like no questions asked, if anything happened to them. This is not one of them, and I think it's just something about this is very wearable and very pretty, but I think I just have other preferences for colors like this on my skin tone. So for example, I think everybody gets really excited about the shade right here, Industrial, but this pulls very, very silver on me. It's like silver with a little bit of green, which I was really hoping for a more obvious green shade. So it's very much like a deep silver. It's gorgeous, especially over glitter glue, so sparkly, but just not quite the color that I thought I was getting. And again, I like these. I like the pinks too. I do find them very wearable, but I think as far as really light pinks go, something about these are not like the most flattering pinks on my skin tone, if that makes sense. So this is definitely imminently wearable, and I definitely would like to get some more use out of it, but again, it's not something that I would like trek to New Zealand with, you know? So I do just want to see how much progress I can get on these. So I do have like dips on most of these, more so the shimmers. I am like super close to pan on Pixie right here. Every time I use this, I'm like, today's the day, and it hasn't happened yet. And then I do have a decent dip going on Industrial here, and I've just started to get some dip showing on the mattes, and there's a little bit happening on this topper shade here. So that is my second palette that I want to work on. And then lastly, if you've been watching my Project Pan, this might not be super surprising, but I also do want to work on my KB Beauty Alchemist palette. Now I got this on mega sale at Sephora last summer. No, the summer before, and I'm not sure exactly what I was thinking, but I think $13 marked down from $44 was like really what got me with this one. And I think it's a really fun palette, but I don't think that any of these tones are like the most flattering on my skin tone. And I think I realized that as much as I like highlighters and I like color, I just prefer a champagne highlight, and I think I'm always going to be a champagne highlight kind of girl, with the exception of maybe like a purple and a pink. But like realistically, I'm not the kind of person who's going to wear green or blue highlighter to the lab or like out in public. So I think it's time to start working on this one. So as you guys can see, actually this is totally a Project Pan spoiler, but I do have some decent progress on this one already. I do have 2 little pans in there. Actually, this guy's not little, but I do want to try to finish as many of these as possible, which I think, given how much I use them, is probably very doable. I think especially the more wearable shades, I think like Pink Opal for sure can be finished. I don't know, by the end of the year is probably not realistic, but probably by like June, I would say that one can probably be gone. As you guys can see, it's the year of the mini palettes, but these just seemed like the best bet for my panning goals and for having some encouraging progress and just for sort of paring down and really getting as much use out of things as possible. Like I said, I love the mini Sublime, I just don't reach for it as much anymore, and I feel like that's too bad because I really do enjoy the colors. I'm wearing this, I don't know if you guys can see the shift on camera, probably not, but this one right here, which is sort of like a red, brown, green duochrome. It's mostly red and bronze, but there is a little bit of green if you catch it right. And I'm wearing that today as mostly an all over eyeshadow, so I really enjoy this. I think I've mentioned this in a couple of other videos too. I am like super picky about golds. This is like the perfect gold for me right here. So there's lots of goodness in this little palette, and I just want to reach for it more. And same with Mini Retro. I think that it's one of those ones that I sometimes tend to reach for other things over, but it is really pretty and very easy to work with. So I think that's something that I could make some pretty good progress on as well. So I think looking and thinking about goals and towards the future, I have a couple of different ideas with these. As you may have been able to tell, I'm very seasonally inspired with my makeup, so I think for the fall right now I'm going to probably mainly be working on this and just trying to get as much use out of this as possible. I am going to be doing monthly updates for this project. I'm not sure exactly when in the month they'll be, probably around the beginning of the month. So let's talk a little bit about goals and sort of where I see this going for the future. So for the most part, as I think you guys might be able to tell, I'm generally pretty seasonally inspired with my makeup. So I think I want to sort of stagger these so that I'm rotating between them and I'm staying, you know, seasonal, so I'm inspired to reach for things. So I think for now till the end of the year, I'm probably mainly going to be focusing on my Mini Sublime just to try to get as much use out of this as possible. And then, you know, if I feel like it, I do definitely want to use Mini Retro like here and there, but it's not going to be my focus. So I think by the next update, which will probably be around the beginning of December, I would like at least a couple of pans. So I think getting a pan on this gold shade right here, which is called Gold Nectar, I think is very doable. I definitely have a pretty reasonable dip in that. Like I'm nowhere close, but I think a month's worth of use, and I think I could be, especially because this is more of a flaky sort of loosely packed formula. I do want to definitely just like increase the dip in the shade right here, Corruption, which is the duochrome, and just get a little bit more use out of this bronze shade. This makes a great like sort of one and done eyeshadow, or you know, I don't really do one and dones, but like all over lid shade and then something in the crease. So I think those are going to be my goals for the update for the next update with this one. And then for Mini Retro, I would really like to hit pan on Pixie because I've been close for a while, and like I said earlier, every time I use this I think today's the day, and it just hasn't happened yet. So I think getting pan on Pixie would be sort of part of my next goal, and then just generally trying to increase the dips in the other shades, especially the mattes, because I have used these way too many times for them to still look like barely touched. But somehow they do. So I think for my Alchemist palette, obviously the only one that I have not hit pan on yet is Ultraviolet, so I'm going to be trying to make that one happen, and I think that is going to be my focus shade for the next month. I don't know if I'll have pan on it in a month because there's not really like an incredible amount of progress. Like there is a little bit of a dip, but it's definitely slow going. But I think by the end of the year there could definitely be a pan on this one, and I think just in the background I would kind of like to focus on these two shades, like the green and the blue, because they're a little bit less wearable, but they're the kind of thing where I could put them on underneath the mask or like on my cheekbones and nobody's going to see that because we are still very much under a mask mandate and probably will be for the foreseeable future, at least till the end of the year. So I think I want to get as much use out of those as possible going forward, and then save the more wearable colors, the purple and the pink, for a little bit later on. So that's kind of what I'm thinking for these. So hopefully I will have at least a couple of new pans for these to start things off by the next month. That would be a really great start. All right, so I think that is pretty much going to wrap it up for this one. I think I blathered on for long enough. So I'm really excited for this project and just kind of to dive into it for this year and the next year, and I hope I have a pretty good feeling that things are going to go a little bit better than they did this year. And obviously, I mean, I picked a really tough palette for a first project, but I would like to make some smarter decisions, and I think working on that palette taught me a lot about like the types of colors that I reach for and what I wear, and things that I maybe should not purchase in the future just because they're pretty and I want them. So let me know if you guys have started thinking about this project for next year and like what you're thinking of reaching for. If you haven't already subscribed and you want to see more of my face, I upload new beauty videos roughly once a week for this current moment in time. If you enjoy the video, give it a like, and hopefully I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!